You were never loud, not because you had nothing to say, but because somewhere along the way, you learned it was safer not to. You learned that silence kept the peace. That quiet meant control. That being low maintenance meant being tolerated. And now, people call you calm, strong, independent. But what they don't see is the exhaustion behind your stillness. The pain behind your composure. The hidden suffering that never learned how to ask for help. This is the paradox. The very silence that once protected you is now the reason you feel so alone. You don't explode. You don't demand. You don't collapse publicly. You endure. And because you endure quietly, your pain is rarely taken seriously, sometimes not even by yourself. You tell yourself, others have it worse. I'm fine. I don't want to be a burden. But deep down, there is a grief that has never been spoken out loud. This video is for the quiet ones. The emotionally self-contained. The ones who learned early that survival meant shrinking. Because quiet pain doesn't mean small pain. It often means pain that learned to hide so well, it became invisible, even to the person carrying it. This is the paradox that defines the quiet sufferer. The very silence that once protected you is now the same silence that isolates you. You don't explode. You don't dramatize your pain. You don't collapse outwardly. You endure. And because you endure without noise, your suffering is easily overlooked, sometimes even by yourself. You tell yourself others have it worse. You minimize your wounds. You convince yourself you're fine because you're functioning. But functioning is not the same as living. Beneath your composure is a grief that never learned how to speak. This pattern is not personality. It is adaptation. Often rooted in emotional neglect, not abuse in the dramatic sense, but absence. No one taught you how to name your feelings. No one noticed when you were overwhelmed. No one made room for your inner world. So your nervous system learned that emotions are burdens, needs are dangerous, and self-regulation must be done alone. You became self-reliant too early. You learned to watch instead of ask, to analyze instead of feel. Hypervigilance became your default state. You read rooms instinctively. You monitor tone shifts. You sense discomfort before it's spoken. Your silence is not emptiness, it is overprocessing. Attachment patterns form quietly here. You may crave closeness while simultaneously feeling overwhelmed by it. You may want to be seen but panic when attention lingers too long. So you become independent, emotionally contained, reliable. Not because you don't feel deeply, but because needing once felt unsafe. Neurologically, this shapes the brain's default mode network, an internalized world dominated by reflection, rumination, and emotional suppression. You don't lack emotion. You lack permission. There is a unique grief carried by quiet people, the grief of never being fully known. You learned early that authenticity came with consequences, that honesty disrupted stability, that being too much risked rejection. So you traded truth for acceptance, expression for peace, visibility for safety. Carl Jung spoke of the burden of unlived lives passed down through generations, but there is another burden, the unlived self. Quiet people often feel present yet unreal, admired yet unseen, successful yet disconnected. Seneca said we suffer more in imagination than reality, but quiet people suffer in suppression, pain delayed, pain swallowed, pain postponed indefinitely. Unexpressed grief doesn't disappear. It mutates. It becomes anxiety, numbness, chronic fatigue, or a low-grade despair that never fully announces itself. Rilke wrote that perhaps everything terrible is, at its core, something helpless that wants help. Quiet pain is terrible because it never learned how to ask. These early adaptations do not remain in childhood. They mature into adult patterns. In relationships, you become the listener, the stabilizer, the emotional container. You attract people who express freely while you slowly disappear. You struggle to ask for reassurance even when you desperately need it. In your career, you overdeliver quietly and under-advocate consistently. You assume competence will be noticed, but visibility still feels unsafe. In self-worth, your value becomes tied to usefulness rather than presence. Rest feels undeserved. Need feels shameful. Boundaries are sensed early but enforced late, if at all. Emotional regulation becomes intellectualization. Feelings are explained instead of felt. Identity becomes relational, who you are for others rather than who you are for yourself. None of this is a flaw. These are coping mechanisms. And coping mechanisms are intelligent responses to unsafe environments. But they are not meant to become permanent identities. Awareness is the beginning of unlearning. Gentleness is the method. Healing for quiet people does not begin with becoming louder. It begins with becoming safer inside your own body. Inner child work invites the question, what was I never allowed to say? Shadow work integrates the parts you learned to hide: anger, desire, grief, need. Nervous system regulation teaches your body that survival is no longer the only option, that rest does not require justification. Softness replaces vigilance. Presence replaces performance. As James Baldwin wrote, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Your quiet was intelligent. It protected you when you had no other choice. But you are no longer required to live in permanent self-erasure. The goal is not to be fixed, but to become whole. If this story resonated, it's because your pain recognized itself. Quiet suffering deserves language too. And healing begins the moment silence is no longer your only refuge.